Thanks very much. Hey, look, first of all, thanks so much for attending this session, which we hope to make as informative and interesting as humanly possible. I will underline the request for questions. I'm sure that in most of these sessions, when you come along, you have something you want to glean from it. I've got loads of questions here, right? But if I don't answer your ones, then that's not really much use of your time. So please do use the Glisser app, and we'll try and bring it into any conversation we have. The way we're going to do it is we're going to try and sort of talk about data analytics in the classic period, pre-event, during event, post-event. So that's the sort of narrative that we'll stick to, and we'll try and go through as we go. And like I say, if you can't answer questions, that'd be great. I would also say that we are hanging around after the event as well, after the session as well. So please do come and say hi if you want to do that as well. That's all about. But beforehand, what I'll do is I'm going to ask our two lovely panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Alex, if that's all right. Alex, why don't you just do a quick intro, but can you also do it in the context of why this is important to you?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining a session on data rather than seeing puppies in the vet show. So I'm Alex, head of marketing at Informa Markets. I've worked at a few other event companies as well, Telegraph and Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. Because I've worked at quite a few different event companies, I've had quite a good experience of very different CRMs and everything from spreadsheet scenarios to really good central data platforms. And for me, data's always been the thing that can really make a difference and is the key to unlocking success. So yeah, big fan.
Fantastic. And Daniel, why don't you give us a little bit about you, GES, and also where you come into this, please?
Hola, señores. That's just from Matt's headset there. Thank you very much for attending this session. My name is Daniel Pearce. I am Client Relations Director for Event Intelligence at GES. And yes, that does all fit on my business card. Data, obviously, for me, being involved in event intelligence is core behind everything that we do. Often, people referred to us in the past as, oh, you're the company that makes the badges. I'm going to let you into a little secret. Printing a badge is pretty easy. It's not the core of what we do in an industry. And I think this session here is really something that, from my side and our team, we're very passionate about. Essentially, data helps us grow and improve an event. And Alex just said one of my favorite buzzwords then of success. Success is something that different businesses are putting a lot of investment into at the moment, and it's something where you can define success and grow success. And that's how we do it. We do it with data. So hopefully we'll try and keep you entertained in this session. I won't make any more Spanish jokes, I promise. And hopefully we can dive into a bit of detail about what we do and how we try and grow an event and make it more successful for you.
That's great. Now, you very, very kindly pointed out a bit earlier when we were having a chat, Daniel, about this idea of data. But actually, it's not just about the data you get, it's where you get it from. So before we go too deep, can you just reel us out a little bit and just talk about sourcing data, if that's okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So data, what does data mean? I guess the key part here is your data's only as good as the effort and the contribution that you put into it. If you've got a database at the end of an event that's got 10,000 first names and 10,000 surnames in it, what do you do? What are you actually going to do with that data? The way that we grow it is by capturing that data at the beginning and capturing worthwhile data. And I'm not going to bore you with a load of fake pie charts and fake line graphs up here. We've all played with that before. But we are going to talk about the different sources of that data. Now, you're at an event right now. I assume, unless you've snuck in through the front door, you all registered for this event. And that's a primary source for an event, is through registration. Not the only source. This event has been going on for a number of years. You build that data over years, and popular buzz term at the moment, right, is data laking, and how we then collect and collate that data. So we're not just focusing on one event, we're focusing on a portfolio, or we're focusing on our whole business, and how do we then analyze that data? So multiple sources, and working out what's successful for you is a key part.
That's great. Thanks, Daniel. And Alex, obviously, coming at this from a marketeer's point of view, if you're anything like me as a marketeer, data is nerd off on that sort of stuff. But maybe, again, talk to me about your entry point into this.
Yeah, so for me, the best place to start with is what makes your product or your event successful. And as soon as you can work out what that is, or what the metrics are, or the facets are to that, then you know what data you need to collect. And it will dictate everything. It will dictate how you collect it, what you collect, and how you analyze it. So just, I guess, as an example, pre-COVID, a really obvious objective for most event organizers would be, we're going to make this 10% bigger next year. And there's nothing wrong with that, but after COVID, all the events, well, most of them certainly, were smaller. And that didn't necessarily lead to a dip in satisfaction. So why was that? What are the things that make an event successful for people? And I think a lot of us realize, well, it's actually the quality of the people there, or it's the quality of the engagement. And once you can work out what are the sort of things that define that, it dictates everything. It dictates your registration form. It dictates how you collect data. So yeah.
Sorry, yeah, just to jump on that, because Alex makes a really good point. That conversation that you've just mentioned there, Alex, pre-pandemic, that was the number one focus of event organisers. If I spoke to an event organiser and they said to me, I had 3,000 people come to my event this year, the next question was, how do I get 4,000 people to come next year? Now, look, we of course want to drive our events. We of course want more attendance, but those questions are starting to change, and how we use data is changing because of those questions. Now the question people are asking is, okay, those 3,000 people that came to my event, how long did they stay at the event? Did they walk in, meet their friend and then disappear? Or did they come for all 3 days? Did they engage with all of my exhibitors? Did they come and sit on panel sessions like you are right now? That kind of data makes an event hugely more successful when we start driving it. Okay, because essentially if we get those 3,000 people to stay for another 4 hours over our event, that is as good as growing to 4,000. That is engagement. That is driving the insight that data gives us. So it's crucial.
And I guess that, Alex, that comes down to your individual objectives as well. And I think, again, we talked in the past about this idea of creating campaigns that you want to create around the event and how those data points put into it. How do you, again, from a strategic point of view, how do you address that data as part of the wider campaign for the event?
So I guess bringing it back to objectives. So very recently, in the past few weeks, we've started doing some interviews with our exhibitors, our customers, about who they want to meet at the show. And obviously that's qualitative data that we're taking on board there, but that will then give us a really sort of clear picture of the golden goose maybe, or people that we need to target. And then when we come to create our data touch points, so that could be our reg form, it could be a newsletter sign-up form, we want to have some way of knowing that we're capturing those people. So it really does go into everything. And once you have that data, you can then use that to set targets. You can use it to hopefully drive commercial revenue by showing your customers that you've got these people. So you see so many reg forms, for example, that are just title. I don't know whoever actually uses that, and then first name, last name, email address, and of course that's so difficult then to find out if you're going to hit your objectives. So yeah, it really should dictate all of your touch points, and when we think about things as well that are not forms, so we think about web behavior, what are the pages that people are spending time on. Once you have those objectives, you can set targets for everything.
That'd be great, and it might be worth us, as we go towards the post, just to talk about how that strategy is then changed depending on what we found out. But let's talk a little bit about what happened during the event as well here. So the big one I think a lot of event marketers are looking at is, right, pre-reg. How can I get as many people into my event as humanly possible, showing some interest? So Daniel, maybe you can just talk a bit about how you look at that.
Yeah, so when we're talking pre-reg, there's a number of challenges. So the first question I would set to you if you're running an event would be, is this your first event? Or is this an event that is leading on from somewhere else? Do you already have a set of data that we can use for things like inviting people to our event? And also, what do you do around your community to build the buzz around the event? And this is where marketing teams tie in very close to it. But also the big elephant in the room, okay? We are in a global situation right now where times are tight. Inflation's increasing, costs are increasing, times are tight. So one of the other really important things pre-event when we're capturing the data is making sure that you're investing your resource appropriately, okay? If you're going to spend £10,000 on a Facebook promotion and promoted links, you want to be able to qualify that and you want to be able to quantify that it was successful. So when we mentioned earlier about the tracking of those links, I want to know, okay, if I'm going to spend £10,000 on a certain promotion, I want to know how many people registered through that link. And then I also want to know, when we get onto the event, how many of those people actually showed up. So then as I'm investing on my events, I know which areas are successful, which areas work with my market, and which don't. And that will help you budget and it will help you allocate your resource in the most efficient way. And I think that's crucial.
And I think to just maybe add some case studies to that, or real life examples. So if you've got maybe a form or a registration platform that you can ingest UTMs with, so for example, let's say you've got that Facebook ad campaign, people are clicking on that, and you've got your tracking, and then people register from that. When you're looking at your reg data, you can see where people have come from. And you can be like, okay, that's working, that email's worked well. And then, of course, you can look at where you're not seeing registration. So, maybe you spent loads of money with some partners to help promote the event, and you're not seeing anything come through from that. So, yeah, the tracking is really important to help decide where to spend money.
And I'm quite interested in you bring that to life a bit more as well, Alex. Would you mind? Because I've got this vision of you standing in front of a dashboard, watching it come in and things like that, and making decisions based on these sort of things. First of all, how sophisticated is it? And secondly, I guess, how dynamic can you be with what you do when you're marketing as well? How can you bring that data to real value instantly, I guess?
Yeah, so I mean, there's obviously lots of different tools out there that would enable you to do that. I mean, you can track UTMs quite easily on Google Analytics as an example, but yeah, if you have a form or a data capture tool that is analysing that data and giving you real-time reporting of that, then that's really, really useful. We use tools, so we use Visit. We're able to see that real-time reporting from registration, and we're able to sort of constantly have a good idea of what's working.
And the same sort of question to you as well, Denny, because I'm just very conscious that to a lot of event organisers, what we did last year, we do again, and actually it's quite difficult to constantly review the minutiae of pretty much any relationship. But maybe you can just bring to life again, how these products are changing to give more insight to the organisers so they can make more dynamic decisions.
Yeah, definitely. You make a really valid point there that we do come across quite a lot of organisers that have a successful event, and that's brilliant news. And then they do the same thing again next year, and the same thing again next year. And while that's great, you've got to remember that your competitors and the rest of the market is always looking to drive and improve their events. So what we're actually looking at each year is not resting on that laurel. It's looking at where we were successful, and like Alex just rightly said about which sources were successful, where people came from, but actually continually driving that event based on that data and that hard-proven fact. We all have a gut feeling about an event. We all know this worked, this didn't work. But what data does is it proves it for you. So you might have your gut feeling behind it, but believe me, the amount of times I sit down with organisers and we look at the data and someone goes, blimey, I didn't realise that worked as well as it did. And that's where you focus that investment on, and that's how you grow your event year on year, is by looking at the hard data behind it. And I know we're going to touch on the questions that are coming on in a little bit, but one's just given me an insight towards this as well. Someone's mentioned on one of the questions about being a data scientist. I work for a company that supplies event data. I would never in a million years class myself as a data scientist. And I think technology has grown to a world now. You've got fantastic suppliers out here today at Event Tech Live. And what we've got really good at as an industry is we supply human data to you. It's got to be readable. It's got to be understandable. And that's how it helps you grow. We're not in the world anymore of you having to export out an SQL database and then put in a million filters in an Excel spreadsheet to be able to get what you want. data and suppliers of data have grown far beyond that now.
That's great, and I wouldn't mind just throwing this question at the bottom about being a data scientist is a good one, Alex, as well. And I guess your expertise is being able to interpret data and make decisions based on it as well within a marketing capacity as well. I mean, do you have to be a data scientist? Is it part of being a marketer? How much expertise does one need?
I think it's just about being curious. I mean, it depends, where you work and what sort of processes you have. In some companies, it's very difficult for people to actually see the data because, obviously for data protection reasons. But the value of being able to see that and just look through is so beneficial. Even if it's on a spreadsheet. I think it adds so much context to our audience, and it sort of like really brings data literally to life, where you see people's job titles and where they're coming from and stuff like that. So no, I think certainly no skills required, just some curiosity. And sorry, there's another question there which I just think is really good, around the sweet spot of forms. How many questions is a good number of questions to ask. And I just wanted to sort of share some stuff that we found. So, first of all, I think absolutely you should justify every question on the form. You shouldn't be asking for something for the sake of it. If it's something that's paid to attend, then I think you can really focus on what's important. When it's a free to attend show, we have found actually that the length of the form does correlate a little bit to conversion. Right. So if you have a 4-page form for people to fill in, as ridiculous as that sounds, we do see a higher conversion because of the effort that people have had to put in to do that. And then, opposite, when we've asked a really sort of quick, short form, we've seen conversion plummet. So I think there's definitely no correct answer for the sweet spot, which is why tracking and testing is really important.
Yeah, okay. Sorry.
Just to jump in on that, sorry. I think actually I'm going to challenge that question a little bit in terms of the sweet spot. It's actually a really simple answer from my perspective. Every single question on a form should be providing something to your stakeholders. And there should be a reason for asking that question, essentially. So if I'm asking a question of which area of the industry do you work in, fantastic, but my question is, why am I asking that question? Well, I'm asking that question so that if you go and interact with one of our exhibitors at the show, I'm telling them the kind of thing you're interested in. But then also make it worthwhile to the visitor that's filling in that form as well. Think about your marketing campaigns. Think about your pre-event setup towards this. If I've said at a transport event that I am interested in meeting aviation partners, then in the build-up to the event, you should be thinking of the marketing of that. You should be sitting there saying, you've indicated you're interested in aviation. Did you know British Airways are going to be here? Did you know that United Airlines are going to be here? Did you know we've got a session on this topic? When you start using the questions to provide that value to your visitors and your exhibitors, it suddenly doesn't matter so much that you've spent a bit of time filling in a form. And explain that at the beginning of the process. This is why I'm asking you the questions. Not being a nosy neighbour that just wants a big database worth of your info. I actually want to make sure you have a better event, and this is how I'm going to do it.
That's great. Yeah, and actually you've segued me very kindly into as we enter the event, which I think is really important. So my initial thing, Alex, is the most important thing is rebooking at the event. Talk to me about whether I'm right about that or whether you have a slightly more nuanced view.
Yeah, so I'd love to know actually if there's anyone from a sales background in here. But yeah, those rebook conversations, obviously I'm in marketing, but I'm sure we've all seen a customer or an exhibitor say that they had a rubbish event, or I just didn't see anyone on my stand. And what we've been doing for the past few years on a lot of our shows is we've really seen a second coming of the QR code. And if you can then use that QR code to enable exhibitors to scan visitors, you get a really good idea of how much engagement they've had over the course of a show. And you can get that data in real time, and then we arm our sales teams with that data so that when they're going over to their customer, and their customer, maybe does say, I just haven't seen anyone. That's strange, because I've seen that you had 100 people this morning, come to your stand and scan you. But also on the flip side, if you can see that actually it has been quiet and they haven't had a good day, you can then frame that conversation, or maybe you can at least react to it, and ask the marketing team to plan some activity or a competition or something to drive some traffic to that stand. That real-time data at a show, I think we often are just sort of so relieved to be at the show and it's happening. We forget some of these things, but it's really useful.
Sorry, go on, Danny.
Yeah,
I think we're going to see.
Just to add on that, actually, we've seen a major shift in the way that organisers work with this because of the value of the data that it provides. So at GES, our exhibitor lead tool called Connect, we've seen a major change where pre-pandemic, perhaps it was seen as an optional option that we would say to all of our exhibitors, if you want it, it's available, it costs X amount, there it is. We've seen a huge change with that over the last probably 2 years now, where more organisers tend to mandate that and build it within packages. And the reason they do that is, yes, it provides extra added value to the exhibitors. We hopefully all know what the basis of lead retrieval is and gaining those leads. But also that insight that it's providing an organiser like Alex is huge. To be able to look over your shop floor and look at who's having a successful event, who's not having a successful event, who's getting leads. And then going back to that data capture, using that information to find out, well, what type of leads are they getting? They've got 100 leads, let's say, but how many of them were CEOs? How many of them have got buying responsibility? Are they actually going to turn those into real world business from this? So this is a major change that we've seen over the last couple of years. The mandating and building it in with packages has really given that added insight, essentially.
And I guess there's two things that come out of that. One is the use of the word real time, which I think is really important. But can you, first of all, just quickly touch on what does good look like in terms of data capture? You talked right at the beginning, it's not just about the analytics, it's about the capture. So to bring me into that show, what does good look like in terms of the capture of that data?
Well, I'll debunk a myth right now. Good isn't just how many leads you got. I do this at every single event I go to that we're running on. I have a look at the exhibitor list, I have a look at who's got the most leads, and I will always go and see the top 5 to find out what are they doing. And I will debunk the myth now. The top 2 or 3 will always be the people that are essentially just data harvesting. They're standing in a corridor, they're scanning every badge as they go through. They're not actually having an in-depth conversation about what their product is, what their service is. So often on an event, I almost exclude those top people because they're just data harvesting. They're not going to get anything out of it. But once I start to get into the list a little bit more and I go and see exhibitors and I see how they're interacting, this is where things like the QR content that Alex has mentioned, and we also do this through things like NFC content as well. Actually, it's not just about an exhibitor getting a lead. It's not just about this magical database at the end that has 3,000 email addresses in it that I'm going to fire off an email saying, thank you for coming to see me, hope to hear from you. It's about an exhibitor being able to go, you came to see me, we shared our information on our latest product with you. This is the contact that looks after that product. This is the person that does it. Those exhibitors that are starting to become aware of that are the exhibitors that are having hugely successful events. They're customizing their feedback and they're using the data to do that. And I think that's a huge shift that we've seen in the industry. The days of the goldfish bowl and chuck your business card in here are hopefully dead.
I think as well, Jess will have definitely have heard this one before, but we have a colleague that constantly reminds us that according to data, Afghanistan is the most populated country in the world, and it's just because people select that because they can't be bothered to scroll down. So, what does good data look like? It comes back to objectives again. So, we should really be encouraging our customers, exhibitors to be, when they're capturing that data, to try and think about how they then qualify it when they capture it. So it could be as simple as adding a few extra questions that they can then just sort of tick. Is this person actively looking to buy now? Yes. What are they interested in? And then select that. So it should always come back to what the objective is for success.
If it's okay, I wouldn't mind just segueing into some of the questions on the screen, which I think we've touched on a few, but there was a good one. I think this is, I might ask you first, Alex, if that's all right. There's lots of distractions recently with so much technology on offer. How do you decipher what is worthwhile investment? How do you look at that?
So, I guess we're talking about in relation to data capture. working at a big organization, that's difficult. But I don't think that it needs to be an expensive tool to be an effective data capture tool. There's lots of options out there that will offer that ability. I think what's more important, and I do keep coming back to this, is what your objectives are. So if your objective is really something quite basic, and it's just a form, and you just want to be able to capture a certain amount of information, well, that's your requirement when you're looking at vendors. If it's something a lot more complex, so you're looking to create a central data platform where you've got data feeding in from your reg form, your website, your social channels and stuff like that. Well, that's going to define what you're looking for.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that as well. So you're right, there is a lot of technology out there on the market, and deciphering what's important to you as an investment. I challenge two parts to this. Yes, the product has to fit you. It has to be the product that works for you. But also, you need to be looking at things as not just a cost. If a provider is coming to you with X amount of cost, you need to be switching that in your head as to, okay, if I invest in this, how does this grow my event? How do I get an improved event because I'm using this supplier? And a huge part that I think is really undervalued in the industry is the expertise behind those companies as well. It's not just about having the best product, it's also about having a fantastic service behind it and having the knowledge and leaning on suppliers such as ourselves that if you're not quite sure how to run an event, our company at GS, we run around 900 events a year. We learn what works well and what doesn't work well there. So it's always something that you can lean on for advice in terms of the service element as well as the product. And I think that should define your investment when you're having those conversations.
And I guess just to extend on that question as well, Alex, if you took the complete arc of an event from pre-promotion marketing, on-the-day experience, everyone's, what's this phrase, trusting God, everyone else give me data. You personally, as someone that looks across lots of multiple shows, how much value do you put on getting that data right? How far above your priorities is it?
If we're talking about registration data, that's definitely the most important for sure, because these are people that are engaging with you, and then you can hopefully have a lifelong value with that audience, which is why it's really important to make sure you're asking them the right questions at that first touch point, so that you can make sure all your communication with them afterwards is relevant for them. And I guess sort of moving into sort of the post-event, these are all people that are hopefully going to come back. So that's really important. And when we touched on sort of on-site data, we can also see what they interacted with at the show, which I think is something that we're definitely getting better at. And we can start to define their interests, not just by what they're putting on a form, but what they're engaging with as well. Really useful.
And actually, again, thank you for the segue. That was very, very, very stylish. Because you moved into post-event here, and again, it's not just what you do know, it's what you don't know. And I think, Dan, you made a really good point around no-shows. Can you talk a bit about that? Because I think that's a really important thing to know.
Yeah, definitely. This is again something I challenge organisers on all the time, is what are you doing with the people that didn't come to your event? How are you using that data? Because actually that data's as valuable at this point as those that came to the event. Okay, all of these people that are no-shows throughout the event, first off, just to take it back a little bit to during the event, if you're running a multiple day event, during the event, you really need to be looking at things like highlights of the day. And we often see like production videos and email updates on that. But you've missed day one, here's what you missed, make sure you come to day two. That might be the make or break for someone of whether they come to your event or not. But then post-event, just because they didn't come to your show doesn't mean it isn't really worthwhile data for you. That is someone that has expressed an interest in your market. It's someone that's expressed an interest in your event. And ultimately, it's someone that might come to your event again next year. You've also got a group of stakeholders in your exhibitors that still might be interested in hearing from that person. So this is where the hybrid and the physical world is starting to cross over now. We're starting to see with things like digital content, If I've got digital content from, let's use my example of British Airways earlier, why not say to someone, okay, you didn't come to the event, but you said you were interested in aviation to us. Have a look on our online portal. There's information here about British Airways. That can lead on to a lead to British Airways, and that then can become useful data for everyone. So just because your doors are shut, just because someone didn't come to the show, doesn't mean there isn't still room to grow and improve your event there.
That's great. And again, Alex, as, maybe when you're back at the office and that data's coming through and you're looking at the, I think you call it the peaks and troughs and things like that. I'd be interested to see what that looks like, as you compare it to last year or other shows. How do you analyse that data? Any intel for the crowd?
Yeah, I think, at an operational level, it's quite interesting, for example, to see the peaks and troughs of when the show was busiest and quietest. And, maybe from an organiser perspective, you might decide that, year after year, the third day is always the quietest day, and it's like, well, okay, what can we actually do about that? Do we want to maybe have some features or some competitions taking place on that day? Equally, when you've got your busy periods, and even like the location of the hall where maybe there's lots of traffic, that can help you with pricing, and where to put your biggest customers and stuff like that. So those, I guess, are operational things. From a marketing perspective, I guess if we look at, as Daniel was saying about no-show data, if we look at a lot of big publishers, like the Times and stuff like that, it's such a sort of data capture model now where as soon as you go onto their website, they really want to capture your data. They want you to sign up, and then they've got your data, and then you can browse the content. But what that means is they've now got you, so they've got that lifetime value, and they can target you with things that are hopefully interesting to you. And chances are, you might come back, you might buy something, you might upsell. So yeah, the lifetime value of all that data is huge. And yeah, we would spend hours sort of putting together reports of who came to a show, what they engaged with, and how that compared to our objectives, and what worked.
Yeah, and just on that, what they engaged with piece, I think that's huge as well. Events organically change over time. You can have an event that is really huge in one sector of an industry, and then all of a sudden that market changes. And sometimes in the event industry, we're a little bit at the mercy of how an industry is acting itself. So if I think of maybe the energy industry, that has shifted massively towards renewable sources and towards ethical processes. That shifts the whole way that an event works. And what data shows us is it starts to show us what people are interested in, what they're engaging with, and allows you to always essentially keep on your toes in case your industry and your event is slightly starting to change over time. So when we're talking about collecting data, little things like tagging exhibitors into categories is huge. If I have got a transport event and some of them are aviation companies, I need to tag them as aviation companies. I need to tag my car manufacturers as vehicle manufacturers. So then I can start to analyse my data post-event and going, well, actually, are people coming here to see the aviation side, or are they coming here to see the car side? If we're tagging that into essential groups for us, we can really start to grow our event and see where we are, and also not get left behind if our industry does shift. That data protects us.
That's great. Thank you so much. Look, we've got about just under 10 minutes left, so what I did want to do is start looking at some of the questions from the guys, if that's all right. There's been one that's been on for a while. Sorry, I've got a mic just here and there. Yeah, so I'd be interested to hear the panel's thoughts on providing benefits to delegates and attendees in return for getting more data. Good examples including friction via contact list, no scan, session attendance tracking, or providing blue dot navigation via the event app. Who wants to field that one? Daniel, you look ready to rock on that.
Look, I think just to sort of duck out a little bit here, this answer varies massively on the event.
Right.
Yes, it would be fantastic to have things like blue dot navigation, but if you've got a 100-person event, you're not going to invest in that. Let's be frankly honest. Actually, the key here is finding out the needs of your visitors. It's finding out what they are coming to your event for. They're coming for a reason, right? So the challenge is for you to know why they're coming, and then do your best to provide them with that. And this is where, taking it back to the registration questions. It's hugely important to drive people into the right areas of your event. We've had so many countless examples over the years of maybe an exhibitor being in a wrong spot or an exhibitor not getting the traffic that we need. It's very easy to have a campaign that says, you've missed so-and-so in hall so-and-so, do you want to go and see them? And driving people towards having a good event. Not just letting them through the door and hoping that they find their way around, actually guide them through that.
Fantastic. So do you mind just getting the questions back up? I think it just clicked off. Oh, there we go. Thanks very much. There was a question here. Any best practices for ensuring non-explicit interactions like long-range RFID tracking and face recognition done ethically? You've got a wry smile there, Alex. I'll let Daniel go first. If it's up to you.
I mean, I'm by no means an expert on that one. I mean, we ask people to consent when they register for our shows, so that's probably the most ethical way.
Yeah, I mean, that answers the question at a high level is, look, everybody that registers will agree to a data policy agreement, will agree to the sharing agreement. Just make sure that's iron tight would be my first example. Get your legal teams involved, explain the way that data is going to process throughout an event, and lean on your examples there. The one thing I would challenge on this question, I mean, the mention of RFID tracking and face recognition tracking, I'm going to put across a bit of a personal view on this, but look, there is a market for it. Don't get me wrong. I just think it comes a little bit back to the example I was giving earlier of an example where an exhibitor is data harvesting and they're just scanning random badges. You've got to question, with that investment in an RFID or a camera tracking, is it actually giving your stakeholders in terms of your exhibitors what they need? It's all well and good having an RFID scanner that scans everyone that comes in here, but what if I just walked in here now to have a sandwich? It needs to work for your event. It can't just be a flat out, this will work across every event. So while there are case studies for it, I'm not shooting down anyone in areas. I think personally you also need to look at other solutions such as entrance scanning, such as lead retrievals, such as QR solutions, NFC, because what that does is that holistically involves someone actually actively sharing their data, not just grabbing it for the sake of it. I see more value in that personally.
Fantastic. And then look, we'll finish on this top question because it's actually done my job for me fantastically well. But just some final thoughts would be great. Just first of all, what would be your best piece of advice in regard to using data for good, basically? Why don't you go down?
Using data for good makes you sound like a really boring superhero, doesn't it? Data man or something like that.
We're in the right room, Danny. We're in the right room.
Absolutely. Using data for good, I think, is essential. My number one bit of advice for using data to enhance experiences is don't share something if you doubt whether you should be sharing it. Okay? How many emails every day do you get full of absolute rubbish that you just ignore in your Outlook inbox, and you just click past it? Being attractive with how you're using data is absolutely huge, and that's what classes as good to me. Always ask that question of, if I send this email, if I send this promotion, does it actually benefit the person that's receiving it, or am I just doing it for the sake of doing it? That'd be my simple question behind it. And hopefully there's no one guilty here of just sending emails for the sake of sending them.
I'm sure there isn't. Alex, please.
We never do that, no. So, I mean, keep coming back to it, but I'd really be trying to look at what are the sort of factors that make something successful. So if we're talking about revenue or we're talking about customer satisfaction, just really making sure that you can identify what those are, and then have that in your data strategy, so your touch points and how you collect those. I don't agree with the concept that you can never have too much data, but you can certainly get into a place where you don't know what's useful to look at. So if you just keep bringing it back to those success factors, you should be good.
That's great. Hey, look, what can I say? Alex, Daniel, thank you so much for that insight. And I will underline the point we made at the beginning. Do come and say hello. If you have questions that we haven't maybe covered, do come and seek advice. We're here all day. But thank you very much to you guys for your time as well. And thank you for yours.